Hello all, welcome to episode 1 of series 2. That's right, series 2 of our podcast. Not often you get the chance to go to series 2 in a podcast. More often, Nordic murder mysteries that run into second seasons. Today we'll be talking about whether we need more than just FHIR for interoperability and exploring the links and connections between OpenEHR, SNOMED and FHIR with a focus on the patient summary and global efforts. My guests today are Graham Grieve, founder and product director of HL7 FHIR. Graham gives a specialist perspective in healthcare interoperability, balancing clinical, management and business perspectives with a deep technical knowledge and capability, and providing leadership to the healthcare community across the world to foster additional healthcare interoperability, capacity and outcomes. Big job, Graham. And we've got Rachel Dunscombe. Professor Rachel Dunscombe is CEO of OpenEHR International and former CEO of the NHS Digital Academy. OpenEHR is a non-profit organisation that publishes technical standards for an EHR. And finally, Rory Davidson, Chief Digital Information Officer at SNOMED International. He's responsible for the effective integration of SNOMED's content development and technology teams. Welcome, one and all. I'll dive straight in. First question for you, Graham, father of FHIR, godfather of FHIR maybe. You joined us in the second episode of the first season of this podcast, which was a little ways away now. First, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Super. I did want to check in with you on the progress of Sparked. From your perspective, time's obviously moved on. What are your reflections on how things are going now and where we're heading?
Yeah, I think we're going well. We've published specifications. We've still got energy. We're still having meetings with broad participation. There's people who are impatient, think we should be going quicker. There always is. From my point of view, that represents satisfying progress. And one thing I've learned is that if you push it too hard, your ability to form meaningful consensus will erode and you'll be substituting apparent progress for real progress. And I don't see any evidence that we're getting apparent progress. I've had some pushback to me on some of the process, and that's good because people are paying attention.
Sounds good. And look, there are always early adopters, aren't there? As long as that wave that follows is a substantial and unstoppable wave, I hope it's a juggernaut as well. And it's good to have, as you say, that natural tension between those who would like to see it progress even faster with those who know that you need to do the nitty-gritty of talking through everything to get to that point of consensus.
I mean, committees are frustrating for execs to watch because execs used to just do something. But committees have to circle for a while before they suddenly get around to the doing something part. And that's how it works.
Democracy. Rachel and Rory, two other components are AUCDI and clinical data models and SNOMED and clinical terminology. Can you tell us more about standards for interoperability beyond FHIR? Maybe Rachel to start?
Absolutely. As many people know, I'm a recovering CIO and I've lived in a world using all of these standards together. What was really important as we start getting into using AI, advanced analytics and everything else is that we have a longitudinal record for our citizens stored in a standardized way. Looking at a data model for the future in any health system is really, really important because the next generation of technologies and patient enablement will need that.
And Rory, your perspectives?
I think we've come to a new start in the world. It feels like everything's starting again, but going in the right direction. We've been playing in this world for 20, 25 years, if not longer. From a standards point of view, seeing these three standards working together well, each one's got a very important part to play in the ecosystem. And what we're seeing, especially going on in Sparks in Australia, is really bringing that all together. It's refreshing finally to see that we're kind of going in the right direction, providing, exactly as you said, about providing that structure, providing the meaning, and seeing it happening on a global scale, which is also really quite refreshing.
Indeed. And speaking of excitement, what's exciting about AUCDI in Australia from your perspective?
I mean, there's been lots of efforts, I think, of similar types of projects in other countries. I think it's AUCDI within that kind of Spark framework that's really got the enthusiasm and people involved. And it's always key to get people involved. Standards is not necessarily the most exciting part of implementing healthcare, but I've kind of seen excitement coming through this and having that spec produced in. Whilst, Graham, you're saying it's happening in a steady way, this is quick for standards. So seeing that happening with the backing behind it and the willingness is what's really quite impressive. I'm looking from over here in Europe, and it's good to see that kind of happening. And from a European scale, I was at a EU project last week, and you're starting to see the same thing, somewhat more bureaucratic and slower, but it's going in the same direction. I think that's what's really exciting about AUCI from where I'm sitting.
And Rachel, similar perspectives from across the globe?
Seeing people vested and engaged with this is really important, because going back, standards didn't used to be the party you necessarily wanted to run towards and be at. So it's just amazing seeing people and how they're documenting their journey. But if I look around the world, I agree with Rory. I think bits of Europe was starting to wake up to this kind of need. I was in Ireland a few weeks ago, and they had a very similar event to the ones you had. You know, everyone was engaged the entire day. Nobody looked like standards were not something they wanted to listen to. People were really participating. And I think Australia has probably woken up, probably first, I'd say, on the globe to needing this, and others are now too.
Fantastic. And Graham, you're in the midst of it. What do you think about AUCDI in Australia?
It's super exciting, both structurally, because we have so struggled to produce meaningful standards for a long while, and also because I get invited to so many clinical project meetings where they're like, we want to manage our patients better. If only we could integrate our software so we could have a decent process, and it's just too hard. But here we are with AUCDI, which is the building block on which we can start building those things. So I'm super excited for all the clinical leads who in 2 years' time, maybe, will suddenly start finding the answers yes, not no. So excited to see that happen, and really pleased that I'm having a little part of it. We're used to in healthcare institutions having the benefit of knowing where the patients are everywhere because of ADT feeds in version 2 to get super technical, and we just take it for granted now. I want us to get to the point, and AUCDI as a key building block, to get to the point of just knowing what's going on with the patient anywhere at any time.
And I imagine there's been frustration because those solutions for interoperability weren't there immediately in terms of the clinician's needs, but you've taken the medium and the long view and said we need these foundations in place to make sure that we can solve those problems, not just one by one, but in a really systematic way by getting that foundation right.
One of the key things for me is that you can't solve everything yourself. And I'm in the theme of the podcast with Rachel and Rory here, is from the beginning we said when our goal is not to be drawing an exclusive closed world solution, but to integrate with terminologies, with SNOMED, with the way things are already done, with systems designed from ground up with OpenEHR, and there's lots of those, where our goal is to collaborate with everybody to get information moving for everybody. And that collaborative process is gradually becoming more ubiquitous. Rachel and I talk regularly, which is like new. I mean, historically radical, in fact. And Rachel started that. Kudos to Rachel. But for both of us, that is not just a technical healthcare thing. It's bigger than that, right, Rachel?
Absolutely. And I think conversations now are about the impact it's going to have on the system, how it's going to improve lives, save lives. And we've got that shared aim together because we know that if we work as standards together, we'll get further faster to actually save lives and improve lives. And really the communities now understand that as well. And I'm speaking on behalf of OpenEHR. It takes time for a standard to develop and the community to feel confident about its standard and how it fits in. And I think we've got to a maturity level where the community absolutely understand how it needs to play with other standards.
Rachel, speaking of connections, can you elaborate on the current connection between FHIR and OpenEHR? Many people might think they're worlds apart.
They could have been if they'd taken the wrong directions. But I think our communities have increasingly worked together, and we've got a really good crossover. People are multi-skilled between the different standards here. And I think they've helped nudge, certainly OpenEHR, in the right direction. But our aim is to continue to talk to both HL7 and SNOMED and make sure any move we make is complementary to their direction. The aim of the future is to be as seamless as possible for health systems to implement.
And question for everyone, terminology is key to data exchange. What are you excited about in terms of driving adoption in the terminology space?
I'll jump in from coming from the terminology gang. I got involved in this world about 13 years ago, previously at the NHS before. It was like an uncomfortable family meeting when the standards got together. It'd be like, oh, very friendly, but yeah, kind of we're doing our own thing. But now I think where we've got to is really seeing where the kind of the holy trinity of standards works together. Each one's got a really important part to play, and I think we now work very clearly, knowing what we do and how we make each of the other standards better by working together. And I think terminology is kind of the foundation. I always see it as like a pyramid, and terminology sits right at the bottom, making sure that we've got that semantic meaning in the data. It means that we need those models, we need the archetypes to be able to structure it carefully, and then we need to be able to share it in a way that everybody understands being shared, from an interoperable point of view. So the terminology is really key. Without that, we're just sharing lots of text. And whilst there will be people out there said, well, with all the new magic technology that's out, we don't need that structure. We still need that structure. I mean, maybe one day we won't do, and I can sit on the beach and do something, less standardized. But at the moment, we do need that semantic meaning, and that semantic meaning really, really helps today. And I always kind of think of this, that the technology is kind of caught up with the semantic standards that we have. And so we're seeing the benefits of having that structure. It means we can get to meaning much quicker. And ultimately, we have better patient healthcare outcomes. That's why we're all here. So it's also really exciting about standards, and terminology. People don't know this stuff exists, and quite rightly so. They shouldn't. They go and see their doctors and get looked after. And it's our job to make sure that it is seamless, and we do work well together. And I think all terminology where we sit definitely helps that.
But at the same time, it's very, very difficult to deliver something that's comprehensible to anybody but the super inside Uber experts who spend their life doing it. The biggest progress we've made for me in the last 15 years is delivering services and agreements around those services that hand off all that complexity to those few experts and let people just develop software. The creation of the infrastructure that led to that has mainly been driven by the FHIR community and is being adopted by the OpenEHR community as the driver for how those things work there, and has really enabled us to both move forward as collaborators at the standards level and at the software level. When CSRO, I'm going to break the rules here and talk about CSRO, Brett, but when CSRO first started offering OntoServer to the Australian vendor community, I did a run around the Australian vendor community and said to them all, "You're nuts if you're not using OntoServer. Like, what are you doing?" And then they were like, "Oh, this is not solving a problem we have." And for 5 years, nothing changed. And suddenly it's everywhere. Everybody's doing it because everyone's like, we don't want to solve that problem. Just use OntoServer to do it. And that transition away from terminology is this idea over there that's too hard to, we just do this and it's here and it's working and is starting to spread across the world like that. That makes it possible for the really good ideas to be brought to bear in practice, which was, a real challenge 10 years ago.
It's brought that threshold for effort down to make people in on it.
Like 2 orders of magnitude easier is what I reckon from when I first started thinking, how the hell would I make SNOMED work in my clinical product back, when that's what I was doing. This is impossibly hard. I needed 4 or 5 people. I didn't have a budget for one. Now I just do this. Easy.
Rachel, your reflections?
Yeah, so that just on the back of that, 7-8 years ago, I was implementing a standalone terminology server, which then had to be updated, and we had to choose when we loaded things in, and we needed people to support it. And just a second, the fact that OntoServe is a game changer, because this is the level of granularity we need for the future of healthcare. It's starting to become an absolute reality. It makes that, that bar of entry a lot lower. It's fantastic to see these innovations happening and be adopted at a global scale, because it does feel like we're all converging as opposed to diverging. Again, back to my standalone server, which could have been completely different to the standalone server of the next, organization. So yeah, it's really good. And I've seen some extraordinary leadership in the last few years. I think there are a set of people that have really stood up and led in a way that I haven't seen in the past.
Really exciting. Rory, let's go to the nitty-gritty of some of those international collaborations, the OpenEHR and FHIR work. What role does SNOMED play there, both as a terminology in product development, in APIs, etc.?
Providing the foundation and providing meaning to the data is key. Graham, you were saying it kind of like the magic that happens that people didn't want to go to because it looks too complicated, so let's just send some text instead for now. But we need that meaning. We need to understand where the data sits, what it means when another machine looks at it in another language in another country, let alone in the organization innovation down the road. And understanding what that content looks is extremely important with the AI technologies that we're all grappling with and trying to work out how we use. The more that we understand the data going into it, the more confidence we have in those tools coming out of it. That's where SNOMED absolutely plays. It's the ongoing theme of the podcast, this really quite exciting world of people working together and going in the right direction. The interesting thing, which builds on the previous question, is how standards and software are working together. And that didn't used to happen before. You had the standards people working over there in one ivory tower, and then the software developers sitting going, what the hell are the standards people doing? And so now we have this working together. We're all producing these kind of open source tools that anybody can use and can learn quickly. And it's the abstraction from the complexity that I think has been a key driver. Graham and I have had quite a few discussions around that over the years about how do we get to making this stuff available to anybody as quick as possible. And that's where we're going. SNOMED plays a quite handy facilitation part because we're sitting at the bottom looking up at what everybody else is doing. We're making sure that data we use is kind of the right data, essentially. So
it sounds like that's the exciting bit for you about Sparked, the coming together of people who maybe haven't had those conversations previously and what can happen out of those conversations. What's exciting globally?
I was privileged to be at MedInfo in Sydney a couple of years ago, where I think that's where Spark started to get traction. It was really started to use. You could see it was the first MedInfo that I've been to, but generally I've been told that MedInfo, that's very academic. It's a bit dull. But it really wasn't. It was really quite exciting. And there were a lot of people there. There was a lot of excitement, and especially with the kickoff of Spark. The involvement of people is really key in electronic healthcare. Without having the people involved, it's just shouting into an echo chamber. And it's good to be pushed back. It's good to be told how to do this. And as Rachel and I were saying, you see this in other parts of the world. We're involved in quite a few of the EU projects going on, and there's a lot of them. There's the classic EU projects, but there's a lot going on, and they would do well to take a little bit out of the book that's been put together down in Australia, I think, to get that enthusiasm and into working with the vendors and the implementers more than just with the standards expert.
Super. Graham, do you think there are really significant lessons for the world coming out of Sparked in terms of the approach they're taking?
Every country has the same challenge, which is how do you get local consensus on what we need to do in the context of international competition, international standards, international vendor involvement. You need to bring together the government and the funders, which sometimes are the same and sometimes they're not, and the vendors and the professionals and the clinical colleges. Everybody needs to be on board and everybody needs to trust the process. And you need to trust that you're going to get outcomes and it's not going to be derailed by various special interests or the ability of people to turn them into a cash cow. Those are challenges. They're challenges in every country, and every country enters that challenge from a slightly different place, slightly different priorities, different history, different culture. People around the world are asking me about Spark. How is Spark solving the problems? And more, what problems is it that Spark is actually solving? Because that's how they know whether it's really relevant. But irrespective, every country can learn from the open community model. In the end, no matter how you organize it, it comes back to people. And what are those people? Who are they? And what are their attributes? Those are the things people are asking me about, because how do we reproduce that in our situation with our challenges? What should we really learn? And those are things that are not particularly clear from outside their challenge.
My personal involvement also goes to those people, bringing enthusiasm, creativity, and a real sense of community in bringing people together. It's great to watch, great to be part of in the times that I have been. I get a sense of a vision building here. Rachel, tell me about that vision. What does Spark success look like for you?
There's one figure from Peter Pronovost that said a third of healthcare is unneeded care or harmful care. And we look at the trajectory of our health systems and their spend. No health system globally is going to be sustainable. And my vision really is that this data is used to deliver the next generation healthcare that addresses those issues, but also enables the citizen to participate. Yeah. So for me, I'm watching very closely because you've got a nice population size in Australia to do this over. Not too big, not too small. And I think that you could really show the world what can be built on top of data infrastructure, because that is the infrastructure of the future. It's not just hospital walls anymore. It's about delivering care via digital and data. So I'm really excited to see where Australia goes with this.
And you're so right. Low value, no value, or harmful care comes with lots of costs. It's got human costs, it's got economic costs, it's got carbon costs that go to waste.
Yes, absolutely.
The whole shebang. Rory, what does Spark success look like for you?
Rachel said it better than I could. I mean, it's about proving that working together, we can get this outcome we've all been working for probably most of our careers. The global healthcare systems are creaking across the world. I don't think there's one there's lots of different flavors, but they're all ending in the same direction. And it's clear that a technology solution can do that, but it can't do it on its own. It needs that kind of collaboration with everybody, standards, with clinicians, with vendors, with software developers, all working together, and patients as well. Seeing that out of ongoing iterations of Spark is key. And the other success for me is that seeing it work being successful in Australia and implementing that elsewhere and becoming the model of how we do this stuff. And the other picture success for me, which is more the software developer in me, is that we don't spend years doing it, that we don't spend 10, 15 years having lovely meetings in lovely locations, but actually getting stuff done so that when we come back here in episode, I don't know, season, 3, 4 of the podcast, whichever season, whatever the cliffhanger is, like a Netflix series, whatever happens next, when we come back, that we're talking about, yes, and now we've got all these systems implementing what we talked about. And look, it's happening here in Europe and it's happening here in South America or wherever. And I think that would be a beautiful place to be. And hopefully that won't be too long. And that's kind of where I would see success as.
Thank you. Graham, what does our season finale look like when we've gone through season 3 of getting stuff done, and season 4 is our giant wrap up?
Well, for me, I got 2 success criteria to represent the 2 different hats that I wear. The first is that incoming governments choose to keep funding the community development and depending on community-led standards and feeling confident that they can still set the agenda. So first, and the second is my wife can gather her quite considerable now healthcare information together using software on her device to give her control over what's a real challenge, dealing with the system. Those are the success criteria, and I'll keep pushing in the hope that we will see those things come to fruition.
Fantastic. There are so many innovations around the world that have been driven by individuals' particular passions that arises out of a personal story or a personal bugbear, whatever the case may be, because they know that it's a real problem to solve in the world. So it's great to hear that remains on the radar for all of us. Thank you so much for your time. Graham, go back to bed. I really appreciate you all taking the time out. And now it's time for a fun fact from Kate.
What's been added to the FHIR playlist and now on high rotation? The Spark by Cabin Crew. Get listening to the tunes that will fire you up on Spotify.
The Sparked podcast is brought to you by the Australian Federal Department of Health and Aged Care, CSIRO's Australian eHealth Research Centre, HL7 Australia, and the Australian Digital Health Agency. You can join the community by heading to sparked.csiro.au. And don't forget to join us on LinkedIn at SparkedAU. This show is hosted by me, Brett Sutton, Director of Health and Biosecurity at CSIRO, and produced by Ed Studios' Janine Hamer and Lucy Ratz, and CSIRO's Dr. Naomi Stecklenburg. Sound by Hayley Dell.